Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Leah O'Donnell. I'm an LCSW psychotherapist and psychedelic therapist, cat provider. And today I'm going to be talking about the evolution of consciousness and how it is fueling new ideas about love, self-love, and love of the other. Going to be opening with a bit of an experiential, then going through my lecture notes, and then the second half will be time for us all to discuss, share our thoughts. So before we start, this morning, I was going to share a little story from this morning. So I woke up early, as often happens when you're anxious about something that's coming up, and I went outside and looked at the stars. What am I anxious about? And, as I started thinking about it, what are the things you're anxious about when you're going to come and do or talk, especially something that's so intimate? You're anxious, people are going to think you're weird, they're going to think you're smart, I'm going to stumble on my words, like all of those things. And, it's normal to be anxious like that. But then I remembered that as I'm sharing these ideas, even more than sharing them through my words, is sharing them through my embodied experience. And even more than sharing them with others is giving myself the embodied experience of being okay with my humanity, being okay with not always being perfect. And so I hope that as I speak today, if I have moments where I start to notice myself getting nervous or going off on a tangent, that I can have the gentleness with myself to come back to that's okay. And I hope that you all can be with me on that as well. Because if anything to take away from this, it's that at the end, I hope we're all in remembering of how important it is to allow our humanity to exist within us. And that's not something to hide here. And supporting the remembering of the value of just our presence. Maybe the words won't mean anything, but hopefully maybe you remember, oh, I like how she was so honest in her experience, and just sharing that our presence and our being is what is our value. And that's what we're ultimately trying to get back to with all of the work that we're doing. Okay, so let's all take a moment to come into this now. This now that has not existed before, this now that will not exist again and that has already passed by. Allow yourself to notice me. Notice the projections you might have about who I am, where I come from, what I maybe am about to say. Maybe part of you saying, oh, I don't like this about her. Oh, she seems like that. And allowing it, noticing it, and noticing how much of it is from me and how much of it might just be your own projection of me. And now take a moment to look inward, noticing how it feels to be you in this moment, noticing how you imagined yourself to feel, how you imagined yourself to be perceived by others, but then also finding space for that existence that is just here, the newness of who you are in this moment. Noticing automatic thoughts that arise about yourself and others, and letting them be thoughts. Noticing that they are often projections of what might be, what to expect from me or what to expect from yourself, and let them drift to the side. Some of the things I say might trigger you. You might be quick to dismiss, as I am sometimes when I hear people speak. It's normal. And noticing those moments of triggers as perhaps threats to your own inner experience and opportunities for self-reflection. Or maybe just letting those thoughts drift and coming back to being here in the present. And as you listen, I offer you the opportunity to ride the wave of what I'm saying, not hanging on to what I just said or thinking about what it might be, not thinking about how you want to use this in your practice. If you want to go down that thread in your head, do your thing. but just also remembering that sometimes it's okay to just be an experience, just be in a space of presence and listening without it having to mean something. And this will be something I'll challenge myself to as well when we do our discussion at the end, to just listen. And when I've done this talk in the past and I'm listening and somebody's coming up with something, I'm challenging myself to not think what smart thing am I going to say to respond, but rather just allowing their thoughts to affect me. So we're here together, we're in this moment. We're together discovering what will unfold and what the alchemy of our beingness together might bring. And in this consciousness space that I've just opened and that you've all helped me to open, noticing that this is a glimpse of that space of non-duality, that moment of being in presence, in connection, without the thoughts clouding us. Clearing projections and trusting in the moment. And we're here about psychedelics, and those are two of the most important things that they can offer. So I'm here today to talk about love. And as psychonauts here, I'm sure many of us have had journeys where we've come back and proclaimed, I figured it out. I figured it out. The most important thing in life is love. It's all about love. And it's become a cliche in a way, but what does it truly mean? And when the journey's over, how do we allow that to affect us in the way that we're existing with others? Something I'm noticing is that we as humans are really moving into new ideas of love. We were raised on the Disney version of love. We were raised on a story, on watching movies like The Little Mermaid, where Ariel, as a teenage girl wearing only a bikini top, who can't speak, goes into the world and meets the prince. And what do you know? He's able to completely fall in love with her and know that that's his soulmate, even though she can't utter words. And we're told this is romance. We're raised in a society where codependence is the norm, where my value as a human is based on how others see me. And it's something that the more that we can see in ourselves, the more that we can begin to move out of. Because it's not something we truly want. It's not something that's creating a healthy space for connection. When we're just existing out of how can I make this person happy? Because their happiness means I'm valuable. How can I make them love me? Versus how can I love myself and allow myself to be seen? What I'm describing is a big part of what I'm seeing happening with the evolution of consciousness. And we are existing in a time where the evolution of consciousness is moving more quickly than I think it has perhaps in history. Psychedelics are a big reason for that. They are fueling this changing idea of what consciousness is and what existence is. We're experiencing a software update of the mind, body, and soul. And I see that especially around the value placed on introspection and authenticity. Humans are evolving and awakening to seeing relationships themselves as living organisms. And when revered and tended, they can offer incredible opportunities for individual and collective evolution. We're moving out of times when it was just such a simple transaction. Psychedelics offer fuel to this process by softening existing ego structures and supporting the creation of new narratives. Which is one of the things we see very much with our clients is that narratives can shift when that neuroplasticity comes in, the experience of being the self without the ego as the self. It can change the way that we see ourselves and others. Consciousness evolution differs very much in different societies. So much of what I'm speaking of is what I'm personally a part of in our society. The ability to introspect has been rapidly affecting humanity. We're moving from largely unconscious reactionary thoughts and feelings into behaviors and feelings and thoughts that are more part of a conscious existence. When you think about past generations, you think about our parents or our grandparents, there just wasn't really a lot of space for internal process self-reflection. There wasn't a lot of space for feelings as an important aspect of our humanness to be worked with. And in fact, I think that there was a lot more of the idea that those things should be repressed. And I hear so often, so many of us were on this path, getting frustrated that we're not more evolved. Why am I still triggered by that? Why do I still do that thing? But in those moments, we need to slow down and say, look how far we have come from our parents and our grandparents' generation. We are paving the way for this new type of consciousness to come online. And it's a beautiful, beautiful thing to be a part of. Where the collective adjustment is into seeing relationships as a key component to fulfilling life, a catalyst for evolution and deeper initiation into the self and a relational love. Historically, romantic relationships have had more of an emphasis on survival, financial gains, women being seen as property, children as continuations of bloodlines and free labor. It seems like in some ways there's been this push to forget how recent these ways of seeing and being were common. It was 1974 was when women could get a bank account without their husband's approval. And now we're in the phase where we're wanting these deep, beautiful relationships, and as we should. But we've come so far so fast. There is an Indian prophecy called the Eagle Congo prophecy that believes that we are in a very special time where I'm seeing the nods, where the people of the South who are strong in heart, as they describe, are connecting more with the ways of the consciousness ways of the North, where the intellect has been so driven. The North has gone through an evolution of consciousness that has emphasized the intellect, has emphasized analytic ways of being, which is beautiful, but in many ways that has pushed aside the more heartfelt ways of listening, of being able to hear through symbols and myths. And so the prophecy is that we're in a time where it's coming together and these are meeting. So the mind is melding with the heart is melding with the mind. We're moving out of a time of objectification of the self and other, which when I was speaking about the ways that relationships historically were, is very transactional, very much this human is to fulfill something in me. Moving away from that procreation, physical and financial safety into true space of evolution, connection. We're waking up from the societally invoked love affair with developmental perceptual identity. The archetypal myth of self-fulfillment most readily being extracted through higher education, marriage, children, and homeownership is beginning to be seen as a myth, as an aspect of being human that can give you a sense of worth, but is fleeting. When we base our worth on hitting these milestones, and when we base our relationship on, is this person going to help me to fulfill this societal value system, then we're really missing out on what is possible. The overemphasis on extrinsic worth as seen through the eyes of other and the witnessing ego mind leaves the individual on a perpetual wheel of striving and lack. So many of us are living based on how are others perceiving me? How are my parents perceiving me? How is society perceiving me? And those are the things that make us feel worthy. As I was sitting this morning, I'm like, I get to speak, I get to share my ideas. That is an extrinsic value system. Does that mean I don't want to do it? No. But can I exist in that space of sharing my thoughts and knowing that if they're not received, I'm still worthy, I still exist. And that's all of these benchmarks are beautiful things, and we're not to avoid them, but in the absence of hitting those benchmarks, can we still find value in ourselves? I've already gone through some of these. Moving away from the self-worth primarily being developed through achievement is the opportunity to begin to say, what else creates self-worth in me? What about me is worthy if I don't hit that mark? And it's not something that I think we've been brought up to know. I consider our generation to be the good job generation. You know, I think that before that, there was a lot of negative reinforcement. And it moved in, I guess, 80s, 90s to good job. But what is that good job for? Very often that was for hitting the achieved goal. But if we as people are only finding our worth once we hit that mark, then our worth is fleeting because we hit the mark and then we're on to the next thing. So the movement towards your value being on your efforts, on your energy, and just on your presence is kind of flipping that upside down and hopefully a big part of what we're moving into now. Wiping off the society program lenses of external worth values and seeing our intrinsic worth. It's complicated work to begin to do that, but that's what I'm talking about here. And hopefully we can continue the conversation and continue in our own lives. So psychedelics offer the opportunity for the deepening self-love that allows all of this to happen. So I'm talking about relationships, I'm talking about love, but the most important relationship is the one we have to ourselves. We can only meet others as much as we've met ourselves. As therapists, we notice this very often when we do some piece of work on ourselves, we can see it in our clients, and we were blind to it before. And in the same way, when we do the work of finding a part of ourselves to love that maybe was seemed hard or we were repressing, we can allow ourselves to love it in others. When we remove judgments we have about ourselves, we can allow ourselves to remove the judgments that we're placing on others. Moving from the unconscious defenses, seeing the projections, and deepening our levels of interpersonal connection through this. The self-love that develops from self-care, living in integrity, creating space for authentic expression, and loving even difficult parts of ourselves helps us to not be as dependent on the ways that others perceive us. This is where the work is. And then when we can bring this into relationships, it's going to inherently change the landscape of how we can relate to others. From the work of better understanding and integrating our own unique psyches, our shadows, our golden shadows, and our higher self, we can have compassion for these aspects of the other. One of the most powerful blocks to self and other love is unconscious feelings of unlovability and unworthiness that developed unwitnessed in childhood. I like to explain this. I think it's something that really almost all humans have in common. And sometimes within our darkness is the space that actually connects us. I think there's a developmental thing that tends to happen in childhood around the time when there's the first shame memories kind of come online, where as the narcissistic beings that children are, we experience somebody else's upset as being because of us. And it's often an internal process that gets very deeply encoded in shame. And because of that, there's this piece of us that feels like, unworthy, unlovable. I mean, obviously this can be a part of a lot of other layers of things, but I think it's just something that is like, just very human. We often have many experiences of that. And when we can begin to share those parts of ourselves with others, when we can begin to share those parts of ourselves with ourselves, we're loosening up our grip on believing that it's true, that we are deep down unlovable, because we're remembering now from our adult self that it's not true. We can have empathy for that younger child part. Finding perspectives on the ways that these early projections continue to affect us helps us to move into more objective views of relationships. Understanding that others' thoughts and feelings and emotions are not necessarily a reflection of us, and certainly not an indicator of our worth. And so as we uncover these pieces, we begin to see our projections. We can begin to see the shadow parts that we were avoiding. We begin to see others as not just blindly being seen through the lens of that projection. We're not being blindly animated by our unconscious thoughts and feelings. We're awakening to a deeper reality. And relationships are a really beautiful, important place to do this. Because when we find that intimacy, the intimacy to show these parts of ourselves to another, it can have it reflected back, as we do with our clients, as we do with any intimate relationship. To allow yourself to share those parts of yourself that seemed so icky that you just didn't even want to acknowledge them, is proving to yourself that you don't believe it to be true, that you're bad in that way, and that part of you needs to be shamed. So a big part of this process is understanding the ego thinking mind. And this is one of the things that happens so beautifully when working with psychedelic medicines. I like to describe it as like, we can help people go from the ego being here, like I am my thoughts, into it's like a little friend on your shoulder. You know, it's a part, it's a tool. And the ego is not something we want to kill. Because the ego, and I say it maybe a different way than other people, but it's like the thinking mind, metacognition, awareness. It's a great tool. It allows us to understand and to plan and to, make shape to things, but it doesn't need to be unconsciously driving the ways that we are working within ourselves and working with others. And the mind itself is a schema making machine that wants to know. And we need this. When you're in a psychedelic experience, it's kind of turned off. You're in a neuroplastic state and everything is new. And that leaf is just so incredible. And the sun is amazing. And, we've all touched this and been so inspired. But if we went through our entire lives with that level of openness, with our default mode network turned off, we would have a very difficult time getting through the day or through the walk to our car. So, but what is that? It's the mind is creating schemas. The mind wants to know. The mind is creating frameworks of what to anticipate. A projection is an anticipation of what you imagine might happen. So the mind is always formulating. It's taking in new, but it also sometimes becomes solidified. It imagines when a person does this to me, it means this. And I'm just going to just accept that until you start that loosening and the ego becomes your friend on your shoulder that can say, my mind is programmed from my early experiences or from my experience last week to believe that I should anticipate that this is what's going to happen. But I know as myself that is a more sovereign being, that might be true, but there might also be other possibilities. And I don't need to be blindly following these frameworks. It's helpful that I know when I set the paper here, the paper's not gonna fall off unless I think the wind blows or I shift my legs. And these are things I've learned from a child, might not realize that. These schemas help us to exist, but they also hold us captive when we are not doing the work of seeing them. And it can be very embarrassing. It can be difficult to see the projections that we've created. And it's much easier to just say, no, my projection is true. You are this, you did this, you made me feel this. So that means that you're wrong and I'm right. And maybe you're wrong and I'm right, but also maybe I've been anticipating that and I was not seeing clearly what was in front of me. Similarly, our triggers. There's a lot of talk in this past decade about triggers. This triggered me, that triggered me. Yes, beautiful. But what does that mean? Does me being triggered mean that you've wronged me? Maybe. But maybe me feeling triggered is a thread for my deeper understanding. And maybe when I can slow down and see that trigger as a tool to understanding my unconscious processing, then I can use it to evolve. Can use it so that next time maybe the trigger will happen and I'll know it's my trigger. And I'll be able to clear the lens of how I was seeing somebody through a projection and see them coming at me with their own experiences, their own ideas, their own thoughts and feelings. Which is what I'm getting at basically with all of this, is this work is allowing us to see ourselves and to see others. It's the clearing of the lenses of projections, the clearing of the triggers, the awareness of the shadows within us that allows us to then see them as existing. And the goal isn't to make them go away, just as the goal isn't to rid ourselves of having an ego mind. It's to acknowledge its awareness and to awaken again and again, to forget and to remember, to forget and to remember again, until the time of forgetting gets closer and closer to remembering, and we're existing in a more authentic space. This work allows us to move into being more fully present and allowing others to be a mirror to our internal realities rather than just objects to project onto. You know, remembering that all of us are mirrors to each other. The negative reaction you have to me, the positive reaction you have to me, it's you, but it's also me. It's, you know, it's a going back and forth. And there's as much that we can see about another in another as we can see about ourselves in another. But seeing a more objective reality is only possible through a heightened awareness of these many lenses that are clouding our view. And one of the most powerful ways to walk this path is the mirror of the deep and intimate relationships developing through a symbiotic dance of self-other discovery. So when you have someone that you are in a trusted space with, a space of intimacy where you can share these triggers, you can share your projections and have reality testing back, it helps us to really reinforce what's mine and what's yours. The psychedelic space is very ripe for doing that type of work as well. You know, it helps that ego to be loosened, to begin to see I can have a projection and that doesn't mean I'm bad. I can have this view of myself and that doesn't mean it's true. I can have a view of you and it doesn't mean it's true. And you can hear me say this view of you and no, it's not true. The Sufi cosmology holds the idea that projections never fully go away, but that we can just work to see them more clearly. And I think that's really beautiful, because just as with triggers, we can get frustrated that we are still being triggered, and we can get frustrated we're still projecting. But that's the software that has been installed on our psyche. And it requires updates, but sometimes you can't just wipe the whole thing, you know? So the more that you can just acknowledge that it's there, the more you can move with it and have the clearing. But as we move into this awareness of ourselves, of others, seeing ourselves more clearly, seeing others more clearly, we're moving into a space of non-dual awareness, of realizing how much we are intricately woven with others and how much our perceptions of others in the world is affecting others in the world, and the same coming back to us. It's get excited there. The more our consciousness evolves, the more awareness of this projected nature can be seen. We can begin to get glimpses of the extent to which our consciousness posture dictates interdimensional mind shifting and our lived experience of subjective experiences of reality. Remembering that our experiences of reality are subjective. You know, there may be some space for objectivity, but it takes much clearing of the lenses of humanity, of our own experience, to even get to a place where we're close to seeing the reality of others. We can get there through the relationship work, like I'm talking about. We can get there through the relationship work with ourselves. We can get there through meditation, pure consciousness, and moments of clarity and relating. You know, we can feel that when we're in an authentic space. There's a different resonance to it, and finding more space for that deep connection is helping us to open up our being to like a deeper level of connection. So the deep internal and relational work that psychedelics offers us ultimately helps us to find more clarity, from the veil of subjectivity and projection that we as humans inherently view the world through. I mean, that's the thing. It's like, you know, a lot of us believe this, and maybe some of you don't, like that we are non-dual beings experiencing duality. We are here to experience ourselves as self-other, you know, so it's like, it's not something to be ashamed of that we have a different experience and that I can look at this from this direction and you can look at it from that direction. Like, that's kind of the point of why we're here, is to experience that. But also, I think a lot of the point is the lens clearing of getting back to the space of being in a deeper connection and being in a deeper space of empathy for the humans around us. Just as we're speaking about the moving from objectification of ourselves and others, this is it. It's, you know, you're not just a tool to help me further my goal. You are a human being that's whole and complete, as I am a human being that's whole and complete. And how can we symbiotically like weave together in ways that are mutually beneficial? Accepting the inherent wholeness and perfection within the self and other moves us out of relationships based on lack and into a place of connection out of gratitude and abundance. When we're in a constant striving to complete ourselves through another human, through the next extrinsically valued, you know, goal, we're constantly in lack. We're always looking for more. And the goal, I don't think, is to not want to hit the goals, but how can we come out of it out of abundance? You know, I always I like to say that like all creation that's out of lack is inherently an ego state. But when we can have a space of creation out of abundance and out of love, it's just going to be a much truer manifestation of our authentic experience. And the deeper compassion that we feel for ourselves from doing this work, from clearing these lenses, from coming to peace with our projections, the deeper compassion we have for others. And I think compassion is one of the most important things in life. I like to say that compassion is the code to non-duality. When we are existing in a space of compassion for ourselves, we will inherently have compassion for others. When we're moving from judgment of ourselves, we will inherently not be judging others. And the more that we can continue to evolve into that space of compassion, well, that's the consciousness shift. You know, I think that I talked about the consciousness evolution as it's come and what we've seen, and what it seems to be moving towards more and more is to a space of deeper compassion for ourselves and for others. And I mean, my goodness, imagine a world where more and more people are waking up to that level of being. It sounds very beautiful to me. And to close, I'd like to share a quote by Carl Jung. The best political, social, and spiritual work we can do is to withdraw the projection of our shadows onto others. So, thank you all. It's making me a little bit nervous. I got through most of it and only stumbled a few times. Because it's hard, because I don't want to just have it all written out. I want to share from the heart, and sometimes the heart flows, and sometimes the heart just, but you know, that's what it is. Yeah. So I would like to open it up for questions, thoughts, ideas, shares.
We want to make sure that the virtual participants can hear. I don't know if we have a hot hand mic. Yeah, I think it's put away. So maybe if you want to share, just make sure you're really speaking up, or if you can possibly come closer over here, it's great, but no worries.
There's somebody who can project. Would you like to share first? Yes.
I was just going to ask.
Excellent.
What are some good steps that each of us can take, whether it be every morning or every day or whenever we really want to work on, you know, dissolving that ego and dissolving those projections? What are some easy steps that we can take to make sure that we're putting that into practice in our daily lives?
Man, easy steps. I don't know, I think noticing, you know, like how I opened with the idea of just notice. You're thinking, oh, she's gonna say this or that, you know, just noticing. Because it's like, it's the conversation within the mind that helps to awaken us to the reality of our consciousness. When it's just this like unconscious or subconscious thought stream that we're kind of like in agreement with, we're not questioning its validity. You know, so I would say that's a big part, but also to not get too into that, you know, it's like the idea of like knowing when to put the Rubik's Cube down. You know, that's why I was like, let's think about that, but then let's also just like hear this all ride the wave together, because it's like, you know, modulating that, because it's very easy to, the ego thinking mind can take over. And we can feel like we're doing the work of awakening, but it's can be like almost all in an analytical process where we're not like bringing it into the presence and the heart. So, you know, it's like a gray area. I think it's a modulation. I don't know if anybody else has the easy. Yeah, you have an easy tip for that. Yeah.
I don't know, not easy, simple, but do you know Byron Katie's process? Because you spoke, okay, so her process is, does anyone know Byron Katie? Okay, louder, Byron Katie. So she speaks, her whole approach is about projection and everything being a projection. And there's a meditative process that you do. And there's 4 questions. Is it true? Can I absolutely be sure it's true? How do I react when I believe that thought? Who would I be without that thought? And then you turn the thought around too. So if it's like, Leah hates me, it would be like, I hate Leah. How is that true or truer? Or Leah doesn't hate me. And it's about the thought letting go of you, not you letting go of the thought. So you just bring understanding to it. And it just spoke to so much of what you're saying with projections.
Yeah, I'm sure other people have this better organized than I do.
No,
Like,
I mean, this is so beautiful.
thank you. Thank you. Is there some good ideas?
Yeah, that was a great answer, and it's definitely not, I phrased the question wrong, because there's definitely not a simple answer. But I appreciate everything you said and everything you shared. I feel like that's definitely helpful.
Yeah, but no, it needs to be too, because
Right.
it's like our mind is so automatic that we do need to find those like easy, simple little things, you know, that just are like can stop that process so that we're not just like downstream in some, you know, lost in some thought. So, you know, you're certainly on something. Yeah. Yes.
I just also wanted to share another resource. What you're describing about noticing reminds me of mindfulness practice, and I wanted to share Marsha Linehan's What Skills. It's a 3-step process. She just talks about observing, describing, and then participating, which I think honors what you're describing about kind of, you know, being in that analytical space to notice, but then the participation, inviting us to enter into that heart space and dialectically balance our response with that observation and awareness.
You have a question or thought?
Yeah, you know, sorry, when you talk about projection.
Funny irony of this conversation. Now we all are going to project intentionally together.
Projecting in your direction.
Yes.
Question about projection, just because what I heard you say, I thought was so unique that I almost want to make sure that I've understood it properly in this context of projection as anticipation. Is
I
that,
mean, isn't it?
well,
It's our
some-
minds created a framework for what we can expect, right? I mean,
Right.
where that's.
Right. And that notion of like, if you're, you know, if you're in this consciousness, like of psychedelic experience, like, you know, try finding your keys or getting dressed, like you can't, that's why we have this mechanism, but that we can somehow remain tethered to that we don't really know. But that projection is anticipation, because your mind wants to just, so we can be compassionate towards our projection, because that function of organizing reality is necessary, but there's also the opportunity to learn how to be in both dimensions. And so I wanted to make sure I understood you in that, because I've never heard it quite said like that in terms of that, you know, projection is anticipation, and that it's not necessarily like you're just projecting your bullshit. You're actually, it's a function of being a human, that it's okay, but we can also balance it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, just that's how I work with it. And I think, you know, you brought up something, one of my favorite topics to talk about is like the need to know, you know, and it's like we always want, our mind wants to know. It wants to, the mind wants to solve puzzles and to believe there's an answer. You know, that's why we'll get those looping thoughts on something because we just can't find answer. But the trick is that, you know, when we believe we know, it's often, it's a transient knowing. It's like a knowing of that moment. And sometimes in the space of believing we know is where we're stopping our evolution. You know, we're stuck. Now I know, I don't need to do anything else on this or think or like see other perspectives. You know, that creates back to that duality in thinking and the ongoing conflict. But thank you for highlighting that. Yeah.
Thank you for that beautiful context.
So I've been working with IFS not that long, and this projection sounds like our protector, right? It's like using all the information that we've ever had to jump in and protect. And then there's the thinking part. So when you're talking about, well, what can we do? We can notice when we're thinking and thinking and thinking, and we say, oh, where's my self energy? Where's my self compassion? Where's my curiosity? Is it here? Do you mind moving over and just sitting with me, projection? Do you mind sitting with me, thinking, and let me feel in my body the answer? And so practicing that and getting to know all of these different protectors seems like a very good way for me to kind of organize all of this.
I love that. I think it's really good to overlap it to the IFS language because it's like, we just, so much of what keeps us stuck in our projections is our embarrassment about them. Like, I'm just like not a nice person or whatever, you know, and it's like when you can pull back and be like, this is something that developed to keep me safe. You know, there's very few symptoms a person has, there's very few negatively perceived aspects of a human that did not grow out of necessity and that didn't come to keep that person feeling safe. You know, and it's just like we outgrow that. It's like the software system needs updating. But yes, same thing. Yeah.
I'm curious how you, you know, with clients create some buy-in around abundance versus lack mentality. Sorry, I love those terms and I find them using a lot in my sessions, and some people are all for it and other people are like just not there and you can't quite grasp it. So just curious if like you have a way of communicating that to people of not just like it's this thing that sounds nice, but it's actually this thing that's the most realistic for us to be tapping into. And the lack is more of, like you said, the ego or the projection or the thing that's not quite true. So sometimes I have, I guess, in creating buy-in with clients being like, yes, I understand that and I can be on board with it. Curious if you have any like phrases or examples on.
It's an interesting question. It brings to mind, I feel like I have a lot of very high achieving clients that I do a lot of work around hyper productivity and, you know, just that striving. And so sometimes it's kind of coming at it from the other direction of like them noticing the ways that they're giving of themselves that they don't want to give. And so what's the reason that you're giving of yourself so much? Why are you working so late? You know, it's because they're not feeling enough. They're feeling like there's something that they need to prove, you know? So kind of sometimes I think once a person starts to see these parts of themselves, see the ways that they're caring for themselves or not caring for themselves, you know, then it can kind of, there can be some buy-in, but also, yeah, some people don't like abundance lack language, but I think often once people are doing the work, then they start to get to a place where they can see it, you know, and it's also, I always say like lack is like the most invasive thing, you know, you'll see somebody come in and they're just like feeling terrible. It's because they are in a place of just, I'm not enough, I need to do. And just that is reinforcing this, like the entire lack mindset. And then you just start being like, I'm not enough and my life isn't good and my house isn't nice. And you know, it invades everything. So, when somebody has experienced that, and can see the way that their financial strain, then all of a sudden they can start thinking that they don't have, their house is horrible or whatever, like, you can just, it's like one long continuous mind chain. That then the way out of that is, back through the small steps of gratitude that we lost through the small steps of lack. So, I guess, more of like abundance, gratitude.
Yeah.
But everybody it depends who your client is, some people love it and some people don't. I don't know, does anybody have a better answer to that, or another answer to that, I should say, can I put myself down? I'm so sorry, like, out of my vision. But did you have an answer to, were you gonna answer her before we go on?
No, I was just gonna answer, yeah.
Before we switch, I wanted to hear if anybody else has an answer to this, because I think.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
She has an answer.
Okay, perfect, okay, yeah.
I don't know if it's an answer, but I actually frame it from the survival protector, kind of from that paradigm that everyone has been talking about, sort of like, these protectors were in place that we outgrew, and this is why, because it helped us survive at one point. And usually when we kind of sometimes have to put ourselves in this lack and crisis mode, sometimes to even, that's the only way we know how to move sometimes. So I think even, I guess, in, kind of putting it in that perspective.
Yeah. To move on, what you're saying is also like, self-love is then also loving that little protector. And I do this because this is what I do when I talk about the ego on the shoulder. It's like being like, thank you, you helped me, you're keeping me safe, but I don't need you right now. It's like the more little pieces of ourselves that we can love, including the like metacognitive process that's kept us stuck there, just opens up just so much more flexibility in our psyche. Yeah. Wait, did you go for your?
Yeah, I think we're all tapping into something similar. And
Yes.
I thought your whole thesis was wonderfully woven, and there's so many tidbits in there. One thing that stood out is the schemas, and I think the schemas are our protectors. And, evolutionarily, they combine information and, right? And you got kind of a bit emotional when you said, well, you did wrong, and there's a point where you become justified with your schemas. And I think that's a point where we reflect on ourselves, but also help our clients reflect that, that's where maybe we can have some self-love, and it's vulnerable. Like when we feel like, that we've been wronged and we're justified, that's when we're really in the protection mode of that schema. And we're kind of imprisoned in there. So I just thought that was a really wonderful way that you put all that together. I thought it was fantastic.
Thank you. I like the way you explained that.
Just to ask quickly about it not being like simple enough or easy for clients to understand. I think I see that a lot also. And the way I'm able to kind of break it down is when there's a behavior, it's like, when did you first learn that? Or when did that thought first come into your head? How old were you? And I think when people can think back to that experience and they can start to break that down and have a conversation with that version of themselves, right? Very much like basic inner child, right? Kind of, let's have a conversation with that person. And when they separate themselves, they feel so much compassion. They're like, I am so devastated for that 5-year-old version of myself that went through X, Y, and Z. And you're right, that's exactly when I started thinking this way. So just to kind of make it more simple, that's where that's where my mind goes.
As you're talking, our minds can go too. Like you're like basic inner child, and we're all like, we're all therapists. Also, like this is new. Our parents didn't, and their parents did not. Like it feels so commonplace to us. I just love holding how much we are just like riding this wave of this new consciousness. It's so exciting.
So be the last comment.
So I came in on the tail end, but what I witnessed was beautiful, so thank you. I'm sorry if I'm asking a question or commenting on something you've already shared. So the concept of just mastery and how that sort of like informs that repetition, like the need to master. Was just a sort of a thought. And also, I think it's important to acknowledge like the systems level influence of that Black mentality. I think a lot of our systems are sick and they're infused with fear. And I think a lot of our high achieving folks in high level roles are really experiencing the symptoms of a sick system. And so to have compassion for, stuff up top and how to really send our love there so that it can really him.
I think often that, our families, our communities, our larger governing bodies are in many ways are set up in a very codependent loop with us. A lot of people are just, we're reacting out of avoidance shame more so than out of, our sovereign truths and authentic expression. And it's, yes, and it starts, within ourselves. Thank you. I think we're done. But this was so nice. Oh,